Good evening, and welcome to the March 18 meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Kalasapathy? Here. Councilmember Bannister? Here. Councilmember Westfall? Here. Councilmember Lum? Here. Councilmember Graham?
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Eaton?
Here.
Councilmember Crapel?
Here.
Councilmember Warpowski?
Here.
Councilmember Smith? Present. We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Crapel, seconded by Councilmember Warpechowski. Discussion of the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. Do we have communications today from our city administrator?
Yes, Mayor, just very briefly. Just want to let people know that the council work session on April 9th will focus on the building for tomorrow, infrastructure, priorities, and projects. Beyond that, I just want to thank Officer Schaefer for being here with us this evening. And with that, I'm turning it back over.
We now come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker today is Greg Pratt.
Hey, everybody. Greg Pratt, Ward 3, Precinct 8. Also member of the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. I'm here today to amplify support for providing services to people who live in Ann Arbor Housing Commission properties as outlined in Agenda Item F6. This resolution focuses on the 40% of the county health, mental health, and public safety millage rebate, which this body resolved last July to be used for affordable housing. This is a good use of the funds because, as we have come to know, people living with poverty-level incomes and experiencing mental illness benefit from services provided at or near their homes. While I look forward to your support for this measure, I'd also ask each of you to reconsider use of the other 60% of those funds for services that support people living with mental illness. Having worked in housing and medical case management in our area for the last several years, I can report that one of the most significant gaps in our mental health services delivery systems is the continuity of case management and therapy for our patients. The nonprofit organizations who collaborate with community mental health do the best that they can with the resources acquired from multiple funding streams to provide a good working environment for mental health support and peer support workers. However, the reality is that due to low pay, many good workers leave their nonprofit positions after a short time. Often they leave for better paying opportunities. While people who work for the county as mental health workers have union representation, workers at nonprofits do not. In order to address this gap, I ask the council and the community to consider helping our nonprofit partners in mental health service delivery to increase the pay of these workers using funds from the remaining 60% of the county mental health millage rebate. I was glad to witness Glenn Nelson's attendance at last council's meeting when he put forward a comprehensive plan to take a critical look at how we go about budgeting this 8-year rebate stream of funds. I support his assertions regarding the appropriate use of funding, mental health services. I look forward to the conversations we will have about these funds in the coming weeks. And I got a little bit more time. So additionally, I didn't realize I was going to be first. Additionally, I'd like to say I'm grateful for the process our community is engaged in regarding the formation of a police oversight board. I thank each of you for your thoughtful contributions to that process. I'm especially grateful for the efforts of longtime community members like Shirley Beckley and Lori Saginaw, along with all the others in transforming Justice Washtenaw. Excuse me. I would like to offer my support in their request that Shirley Beckley be added to the list of task force members, along with
Thank
Lori
you.
Saginaw as taking the role of chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker today is Alice Carter.
Good evening. My name is Alice Carter, and I've lived on the west side of Ann Arbor for a number of years. I'm coming to you today to ask you to restore Ann Arbor's allocation from the mental health and public safety millage to projects that enhance mental health and public safety in the city of Ann Arbor. If you cannot entirely walk back the funds, I encourage you to use monies from the general fund. My interest in this comes from my working with the county for almost 20 years, first as a public health nurse, before community health was ever existed, also as a child psychotherapist with the Huron Valley Child Guidance Clinic, where I started the infant mental health program, and last with a program called OBRA, which none of you have heard about. It means Omnibus Reconciliation Act. It's a federally mandated program that's executed by the state and carried out by the counties for people with developmental disabilities and mental health problems to keep them out of nursing homes. When I was at the Child Guidance Clinic, a third of the children I saw in the 90s had a parent who was incarcerated, but there was no opportunity to serve these children because there was no programs in existence for them. Likewise, with OBRA, in our attempts to keep people out of nursing homes, there was very little opportunity to find high-quality alternatives. So I think some of the millage money could be very well spent in these two areas. I realize that I think of myself as usually very well informed when I vote, but somehow I missed the fact that you had allocated back in July funds to go into climate action and housing, although I do support the housing piece now that I know more about it. I think this is either a marketing problem or an information problem. On the way in here, I was talking to someone, and we talked a little bit about without the Ann Arbor News 7 days a week and editorials and all those kinds of things, it's hard to know how to get information out to the public. So maybe you, if you haven't already got some thoughts on that, maybe that's something you might want to also consider. With regard to housing, I applaud that there would be attempts to help people with this, but I think I would like to know a little bit more about exactly what you're thinking. When I say this, it's because I'm wanting to know what's happening at 415 West Washington Street. That's been an eyesore as long as I've lived on the west side. And so I called, I don't live in the historic district, but I called someone from that the other day. And they said that because it's part of their historical district, you were supposed to be in contact with them. I have 3 minutes. Okay. Well, I have some thoughts of more, but I'll email you. And thank you so much. I appreciate all your work.
Thank you. Our next speaker today is Maria Ibra Freire.
Dear Mayor and members of City Council, tonight marks a crucial step towards independent, transparent, representative, and fully funded police oversight in Ann Arbor. The establishment of a task force to develop a charter for a police commission is unprecedented in the 194-year history of Ann Arbor. Transforming Justice Washtenaw is deeply grateful to the many Ann Arbor residents who, for decades, have struggled to bring us to this moment of real progress. We thank the Human Rights Commission, City Council, and the Mayor for their hard work and deep thought that you have put into this process. And we're especially thankful to the Human Rights Commission for dedicating and selecting a representative group of people to serve in the task force. We appreciate the care and consideration the Mayor has shown in his recommendations as proposed in this resolution before us today. Transforming Justice Washtenaw has reviewed Mayor Taylor's resolution, and we are encouraged in many ways. The mayor's resolution draws heavily on the excellent suggestions of the Human Rights Commission, and reflecting the requests from many Ann Arbor residents, the mayor's resolution includes Black residents with longtime roots in Ann Arbor who are currently residing in the surrounding communities. TJW is delighted to see the inclusion of youth of color represented in the task force. We commend Mayor Taylor for listening and for putting forth a resolution that reflects great progress. Despite this, we have two areas of concern. First, the mayor's proposal reduces the number of African Americans on the commission as compared to the human rights recommendations. Most disturbing, however, is the fact that one of the two African Americans dropped by the mayor from the Human Rights Commission's list is longtime Ann Arbor advocate for police accountability and fairness, Shirley Beckley. To put it in the simplest of terms, Shirley Beckley offers invaluable direct experience, historical perspective, and practical expertise to the process of policing accountability and transparency. Ms. Beckley's absence from the task force would sorely undercut the credibility of its recommendations and undermine the community trust this process seeks to build. Second, in the crucial selection of the chair, we believe that direct community relationships and demonstrated experience in facilitation and inclusion of diverse perspectives are of highest priorities. Lori Watanabe Saginaw is one of the HRC's candidates for chair, and is a woman of color with deep relationships in every demographic corner of Ann Arbor. She has earned a strong reputation as a skilled and inclusive facilitator of group deliberations. As chair, Ms. Saginaw would ensure that the task force meets its goals in a timely way and produces recommendations that reflect the breadth of knowledge and wisdom of its members. Tonight, the mayor's resolution could easily be strengthened. Transforming Justice Washtenaw therefore calls on City Council to reinstate Shirley Beckley to the list of task force members and name Lori Saginaw to serve as the chair of the task force. Transforming Justice Washtenaw looks forward to a continued work together towards independent, transparent, and representative police review in Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lafiste Gallimore.
Good evening. Greetings to the mayor and the city council and the staff. I'm here to talk about the police task force, and I have a concern that about the composition of this particular task force. When I took a look at the list of individuals that was recommended to be on that group, one of the things that I noticed is that there was no black males on that. There was one who is also a part of the Human Rights Commission on that particular committee, but I didn't see a diversity of black males in the community on that particular task force. And I think that that is probably one of the weaknesses that that the mayor has recommended too, that the resolution includes, omits, is the fact that it does not represent the diversity and the experiences of individuals from the community. And by that I mean that, what about individuals that have had contact with the system? Okay, they may or may not be bad people, but at least they have the experience of being able to recommend and to make suggestions about what would constitute an appropriate task force. I don't see the diversity there. And I'm really concerned about that because, as the previous speakers indicated, is that it tends to undermine the credibility of the organizations or any recommendations that the task force may make in terms of creating a commission to look at police oversight. So I think that that's a very significant weakness, to the recommendations that has been made to this particular body. I, for one, put in an application to serve on this particular committee. And for some reason or other, I understand that I was listed as an alternate at first, and as the mayor made his recommendation, that my name was eliminated from that list. And I would like to know what criteria that you use to make that recommendation, and what criteria they use to make a decision in terms of who to include and who to exclude, especially individuals that have lived in this community, have a vested interest in the quality of life of individuals that live in this community, and that has invested a lot of time, effort, and energy towards improving this community just where it represents the citizens that live here, regardless of who they are. And so I would like to have some input in terms of how your decision was made going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dick Sobel.
Much of what I was going to talk about has already been resolved, and that is I was going to speak to having co-chairs, and I can see that people were smarter than I and came to it quicker than I did. So I want to congratulate everybody for doing that. I think it's a positive way to start, and I think it will have an impact in the community and will give us stronger leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Amory Vahu.
Okay. My name is Amory Zhao. I live on Arella Boulevard. Hello, good evening, Council. First, I want to praise the Human Relations Commission, Council, and Mayor Taylor for their amazing work on putting their ideas for a task force together. Obviously, the result of a ton of labor and a ton of listening and doing, respectively. The HRC especially deserves a lot of gratitude for their push for inclusiveness on the task force in choosing a representative group with exceptional qualifications. I want to present a relevant and important idea for Council to consider before I continue. Expertise which comes from direct life experience and identity is absolutely precious to social progress. As I've repeatedly said to Council in the past, we're failing at transparency, we are failing at accountability, we are failing at fairness in policing, and if this task force is to be anything but performative, we need the most committed, devoted people we can find who care about all of Ann Arbor's residents and draw expertise from experience and history participating in it. That said, the mayor's resolution, though promising, presents some barriers to a lot of concerned local support. Barrier one between this resolution and full public support, the mayor's resolution removes Black representation from the task force compared to the Human Relations Commission suggestions, one of which being Shirley Beckley. In my time knowing Ms. Beckley, she's embodied care and perseverance. Shirley has huge depth of experience, depth of care for this town, depth of historical understanding about policing in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, and is completely devoted to community safety. She's a joy to be around and work with. That means she would be an incredible asset to any team of people working to build something good for the city, but especially a task force devoted to transparency and fairness. I think Council knows who she is and knows about her life of tireless advocacy for fairness and accountability in policing. If they are familiar or have seen Ms. Beckley's longtime advocacy, they know that about her views, informed by historical background experience and deep care for all kinds of Ann Arbor people. In short, Shirley Beckley is needed on this task force and City Council should reinstate her on the resolution. Barrier two, we want Lori Watanabe Saginaw to be named chair of the task force. She, like Shirley, is someone who embodies devotion, flexibility, fairness, and is tireless in her work. As chair, she will elicit and synthesize the best contributions of all the task force members. I've only ever known her as great to be around, have heard great reports of her work, and she has a very respectable reputation as a group facilitator and team player. In all, I'm hoping that Council will listen to the HRC. We want Council to preserve their hard work and honor their well-researched judgment. So thank you for listening and thank you for your care.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Samia Harrison.
My name is actually Sima, but it's a thought that counts.
Pardon me.
This is for all of my dad's family. Gentrify. Verb. To renovate or improve, especially a house or district, so that it conforms to middle-class taste. 1. I learned to ride my bike on 5th Ave, right by West Summit Street, where my father grew up in a black neighborhood. Wheeler Park was our spot where Dad used to tell me stories. How half of that park used to be a slaughterhouse. You could hear the pigs squeal when they were electrocuted, when the hogs escaped. The kids with ashy knees, worn Converse, and smiling faces had to hop up on the fence, would watch and laugh as the workers ran around chasing after 500-pound hogs. 2. Community High School used to be a segregated black kids-only school called Jones Elementary. Until my dad was in 2nd grade when they bussed him off to a white school, put him in a class where he was the only black kid he was supposed to be lucky. Passed a test that said he was smart enough to learn with the white kids he was supposed to help bridge a gap. But all he tells me is how the white kids made fun of his tightly curled hair and full lips, told him his skin was like the mud beneath their feet and his voice always strains a little bit. He shakes his head, his eyes lose their brightness just barely enough to notice when he talks about elementary school. 3. This city used to have a hood filled with black kids who were rowdy and loud and ready to fight. They walked with targets on their backs, black skinny bodies thirsty for change, black kids who picketed on street corners for fair integration and justice, whose voices boomed over quiet streets, even with police just a little too happy to shoot. 4. I do not see my city flourishing and full of color. I see white men drinking in my appearance, their voices sliding out of slimy mouths, telling me how badly they want a taste of caramel or chocolate. I see pieces of my father's childhood shattered by wrecking balls, ugly, expensive dorms take their place, making room for the college students who don't know about this city's history and don't give a damn to learn about it. I look through this city and the parts that once belonged to us and see only white faces staring back. 5. You say this city is safe now, but how many people were abandoned because they couldn't pay the rising rent? How many children were left with no home because high-rise U of M buildings were more important than a black child's future? Because we are told we are always less. 6. I used to think integration was justice. I used to think that the white takeover of black neighborhoods was a step in the right direction. Now, I can't help but wonder, was my father's trauma just collateral damage in your fight for equality? Gentrify. Verb, the correct definition. To kick out innocent families of color in the name of making a better neighborhood. To whitewash a community until it is just as bland and tasteless as flour. Thank you.
Thank you. Just give the rest to, if you give the rest to her, she'll pass it on. Thank you. Are there communications from council? Councilmember Lum.
No communications. I would just note that the city administrator's report today, he indicated that our city clerk is nominated for Michigan Clerk of the Year. I appreciate the shout out in the administrator's report, and congratulations, Ms. Boudry. You obviously get our vote, so way to go. And thanks again for the shout out, Mr. Administrator.
Further communication from council? Councilmember Grant, my apologies.
No, it's a tough act to follow. So just wanted to update council. I met with the newest members of the Student Advisory Council at the University of Michigan last week. They are not surprisingly very interested in affordable housing and other important issues to students. So I look forward to getting additional feedback from these students. That was a recommendation of this group from last year, and bringing it forward to council and to their work on improving our relationships between the student communities and the council.
Further communication from council? I have no communications today. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Crapo, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of the consent agenda. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The consent agenda is approved. We now come to a public hearing. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about specific items on the agenda. You need not have signed up in advance to speak at a public hearing, but your speech must relate to that specific item on the agenda. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Public hearing number 1, resolution to approve 1505 White Street site plan. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? I'm sorry, we have before us, was there a, do you wish to speak at the public?
Permitting for demolition is separate from a site plan. It's just whether or not it can be reconstructed.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. We have before us the work session minutes of February 12 and the regular and the special and regular session meeting minutes of March 5. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? Moved by Councilmember Crapo, second by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor? All opposed? The minutes are approved. DC 1, resolution to confirm members of an advisory task force to prepare a recommendation outlining the roles and responsibilities for a proposed community policing commission. Moved by Councilmember Kalasapathy, second by Councilmember Crapo. Discussion, please, of DC 1. I'm going to take first step at this, and I guess I'd like to say a couple of things. The first, this is obviously, and I think has been noted at public comment, is an important step for the city. You know, we have had a conversation about policing going on for quite some time. It started, you know, with the Human Rights Commission. It then developed at their recommendation to the retention of an outside consultant. We worked with them to identify that consultant, Hillard Heinz. They came in, they delivered their report. Their report was reviewed and critiqued, and as a result, the process was developed to create a task force. This task force's goal is to recommend to the city administrator the tasks for the policing commission or the community policing commission, whatever it ends up being called. I think, you know, for my part, I'm particularly excited that this is going forward. You know, we live in a time where law enforcement and community relations is of plain and obvious interest and tremendous importance, and we haven't had a place for this conversation, a place for this review in Ann Arbor, and a policing commission stood up and strong. Will be, I think, a good and proper place for that conversation for members of the public to learn about the police, for members of the police to learn about the public, for both to engage with each other, both to explain themselves to each other, and both to critique each other. So that, I think, is what that's the process that we're undertaking. With more particularity, the Human Rights Commission has reviewed applications and has identified folks that they recommend to serve on the commission. As you know, anybody who spends any time in Ann Arbor knows there are more people in Ann Arbor who have skills and abilities than there are places for them to serve. There are more people in Ann Arbor with skills and abilities than there are places for them to serve. And that was the case with the folks who came to the Human Rights Commission, and that's certainly my belief in for the folks whose names came to me to make decisions. And so I'd like to, you know, thank everybody who came and made their application to the Human Rights Commission. If your name is on this task force, you know, that is good, and if it remains, then that is quite good, and that is double good, and we look forward to your service. If your name is not on the task force list and does not you know, there appear, your opportunity to serve in the city is not done. Your opportunity to serve in this area is not done. There will be other opportunities. I guess I'd also like to say, as putting this together, it was, and I described this process earlier, that it's in my view that this is a place where we need to have a constructive, engaged conversation. This is, and that doesn't mean conversation that does not come from anger. You know, we live in a society where we live in a society, you know, in a country, you know, quite literally founded on white supremacy, and the result of that founding, the result of that original sin in our country, is still with us. It means that people like me have privilege that we sometimes, you know, vaguely perceive, and sometimes do not perceive, and it's my obligation, and I think to strive to be aware of that and to move forward on that basis. Taking the applications in, you know, I think that they will. I'd like to run through a couple of other things I'd like to say. Applying to the nominations to this task force are met with a level of scrutiny and public engagement that is very uncommon. And, you know, on the one hand, that demonstrates, well, not on the one hand, simply put, it demonstrates the importance and interest that members of the community have in this task force, and that's quite good. On the other hand, you know, anytime that there's, you know, more applicants than there's room, there will be people who are not selected. There'll be people who are chosen for one reason or another, and people who apply from boards and commissions, you know, aren't always interested in that public conversation, aren't always interested in having themselves evaluated. Certainly, that's what some folks have spoken to me about over the course of time. You know, people who sit here at council, you know, we have signed ourselves up for critique. And, you know, I want people to know that, you know, as you apply to boards and commissions, that it's far from my intention to subject you to critique. Now, going through the list a little bit, just to talk a little bit about my process, I'd like to touch first upon co-chairs. As some members in the House know, the resolution as currently articulated provides for a recommendation of co-chairs, that is Ms. Saginaw and Mr. Friedman. You know, as people also know, that it didn't start off that way. It started off with the sole recommendation for Mr. Friedman. The Human Rights Commission recommended that either one of them could serve ably. I chose Mr. Friedman as an initial matter because of his service, you know, as an attorney. He is a criminal procedure attorney here at the University of Michigan. He's argued in the United States Supreme Court in favor of defendants to extend Fourth Amendment rights and others that I might not be aware of, and has served as chair of the university's policing commission. In my communications with him, he's assured me that if I'm looking for someone who is not interested in an independent and active commission, that I've turned to the wrong person. And you know, if anybody knows Professor Friedman, you know that when he says that, he means it. And so, you know, I valued that expertise going out. This is by no means, it was meant as an initial matter as a denigration of Ms. Saginaw. I've met with her on a number of occasions. I've watched her on a number of occasions. You know, I know the great work that she does in the community. I was delighted that she was you know, desired to be on the commission in the first instance, and that she would indeed be on it. You know, it was then communicated to me that that was that I had erred in the view of folks who are interested in this, that they felt that was a misstep, that the work of the commission, the work of the task force, the constructive work of the task force would be inhibited by her absence. And so, you know, when people come to me in good faith and talk to me in good faith, and you know, it is my obligation to listen and evaluate. And so I did that, and I'm delighted that we were able to find a solution. I think that meets the goals of you know, ensuring that there are, you know, people with history in policing commissions who are participants in the activity, but also meets the goals of having folks who are known and honored in the activist community. And so I'm delighted to put forward Ms. Saginaw and Professor Friedman as co-chairs. Also, there was, you know, I want to go through a list. There is a youth member of the community, Mr. Cotton. He, you know, from the outset of this conversation, it's incredibly important that there be folks at the task force and at the commission eventually, and I hope that there are more youth folks on the commission eventually to represent the youth of our community, the people who come and live and go to school and you know, participate in Ann Arbor life. The neutral zone is a focus for much of that, and I was delighted to solicit and receive their recommendation for Mr. Cotton's participation in the task force. The other 9 members of the community, of the commission, and again, I will say that there are more qualified members than there are roles, I think touch and hit upon a number of the attributes that we discussed here at the table in the initial resolution. There are people there on that commission who have been active with the Human Rights Commission for years, particularly chairing the Human Rights Commission subcommittee. There are members of the gay, lesbian, transgender community who are in clergy roles and who provide counseling and mental health services throughout the community. There are social workers and public defenders who are active in the Democratic Party Black Caucus and who participate on an ongoing basis and in a critical basis in street law trainings to do what we can to reduce and eliminate the school-to-prison pipeline, to make sure that youths throughout our community understand their rights and that, quite simply understand their rights, because indeed they are their rights. There are members of the recommended task force who are civil rights attorneys who have mediated civil rights and police misconduct cases, who are experienced and respected mediators throughout our community. I've already spoken of Ms. Sagina's qualities. We have MSWs, people who have social work degrees, who are active and managers of the Michigan Juvenile Youth Justice Advisory Board, who are practiced practitioners of restorative justice, crucial elements for a task force focused on these issues, crucial elements ultimately for a commission focused on these issues. We have people who have history in our community, long-standing board members from the Community Action Network and long-standing community volunteers in church and elsewhere. We have educators, long-time principals, active in the African American community, active in the education community. We have people, too, who have careers, long careers, distinguished careers in community education, work with incarcerated persons in our community, and work with the Washtenaw Family Court. These are some of the people who are in the commission, I keep saying commission, and that's not right, it's task force. These are some of the folks who are task force members as recommended. I think that this group of people is, as I indicated, fewer set of people than could ably serve. It is a set of people that if, my notes are betraying me, pardon me. It is a smaller set of people than could ably serve, but nevertheless, that is a group that I believe will ably serve, that will do the job that we ask of it, that will be able to, with diligence and constructive engagement, do what it is that needs to be done. Finally, demographics have been raised. Normally, that's not an overt subject that we talk about at the council table with respect to commissions. I think that it's nevertheless appropriate to engage it here, as I indicated. The resolution asked for folks who are skilled in the areas of law, social work, restorative justice, youth empowerment, and mental health, and I believe that we have it. It also asked that we have that we be representative of demographic groups with a particular interest in equitable policing, and I believe that we have that too. By my count, and race and identity are in some instances fluid, and so I hope people will forgive me if I make assumptions about people. That we have 2 African American men, we have 3 African American women, we have 1 Asian American man, 1 Asian American woman, 3 white women, 2 white men. This means we also have at least 1 person who publicly identifies as LGBTQ. This means to my eye that the task force is majority woman, which I believe to be a good thing, and majority minority, which I also believe to be a good thing. It's not perfect. I'm not perfect. The set of people before us, all of us have our things. But I believe that it is a task force that, if allowed and encouraged to do its work, will come back and do us proud. Further discussion? Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. From the beginning, this process that we're taking another step in has been citizen-driven. After the fatal shooting of Aura Rosser, there was a demand that we make a meaningful response. And Councilmember Kyla Sapathi and I came to a council meeting, and during council comments, mentioned that we believe that the Human Rights Commission should take up this issue because they had done such good work on our civil rights ordinance. From the beginning, I've worked with Councilmember Kyla Sapathi to usher this through the Human Rights Commission. They've done just fabulous work. These are citizen volunteers who just expended an extraordinary amount of time and effort coming up with recommendations for us to take forward. Last year, we spent a lot of money on an outside consultant, and some of us believed that we were getting off the path that we originally intended to take. And a group called Transforming Justice Washtenaw formed, again, citizen activists who implored us to do the right thing and to do it in a meaningful way. I've been proud to work closely with Transforming Justice Washtenaw, and right up until a couple of hours ago, I was exchanging emails and phone calls with members of that group. The appointment of this task force is just a small step along this process. I want to thank the mayor for all of the consideration he's put into this. This is not an easy task. I want to especially thank him for making himself available over the weekend to discuss with me and other residents some of the particulars of his choices. In many ways, he satisfied my concerns about some of his choices. He offered what I believe is a reasonable compromise at our insistence that Lori Saginaw be the chair. He offered that the committee be headed by co-chairs. I think that's very reasonable, and I can accept that. One of the things that has driven this process from the beginning is our friend Shirley Beckley. She was there at the beginning, and she's been there at every meeting. She's been there to discuss with any one of us individually any issue that we have about this. But more important, Ms. Beckley has a historic grasp of why this community needs to have a civilian review process. Ms. Beckley and I have not always agreed. We've sometimes actually bumped heads. She has always been respectful to me in that manner. Some of her statements I've found to be a little over the top. But as we get closer to fruition in this process, I found her to become more and more reasonable. It's quite understandable to me why a person might be a little harsh or a little impatient when they've waited their whole life for us to talk about justice. And so I know that she said some unfortunate things, in my opinion, but I also understand being impatient for justice. So it's this that leads me to believe that she needs to be a part of the task force that sets us further down the path on this process. And so I've emailed the clerk an amendment that would amend the list of appointees to the committee. I hope that she'll distribute that. And this is the second hard part for me, is that everybody on this list is well qualified and talented. And so in order to make room for Ms. Beckley, it took me most of the day discussing the issue with many people in the community to come up with somebody to bump off from this. And this is not personal. I don't believe that the other person is unqualified or that there's anything wrong about having her on the committee. There's just only 11 slots, and there were 26 applications. So I've offered an amendment to the fifth whereas clause that would replace Anna Gersh with Shirley Beckley. And then I have offered an amendment to the sixth whereas clause so that that would read, whereas all nominees are Ann Arbor residents other than Robin Stevens and Shirley Beckley who have Ann Arbor addresses but reside in Pittsfield Township. Janet Hayes, who has an Ann Arbor address but resides in Superior Township. And Kershawn Cotton, who attends Ann Arbor Pioneer High School but resides in Ypsilanti and was recommended by the neutral zone. And so I offer that amendment.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Mr. Eaton, you still have the floor.
You don't have that? I'm sorry. I did mean to send it. I may not have a connection. Pardon me. I'll try sending it again. My apologies. Did you get it that time? I'm having. Did you send it?
I sent it.
Okay, that's it, I suppose. Yeah. My apologies again.
I only sent it to Jackie. Jackie and Janet.
And so I think I've explained the amendment, and if anybody needs to actually read it, I'll wait until it's distributed, but I surrender my speaking spot. Did you get that?
Is everyone clear as to the text? It's observed that Ms. Haynes, I believe, lives in Scioto Township. That was an error in our original resolution.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that correct? Thank you. Question. Yeah, thank you. There's a difference in the co-chairs.
Yeah, I don't mean to affect that at all.
Fair enough. The chairs can, that was taken from a prior version of the resolution. I think we can go with the observation that the co-chairs are accepted in that amendment. I'm going to oppose that amendment. And I understand why we're having this public conversation, and as I indicated previously, I don't like having public conversations in opposition to applicants. I believe that is inconsistent with, I believe that discourages other applicants from coming before us, from volunteering their time, and I think that it's unfortunate that we're having it. The reason I'm going to oppose this resolution is not because I don't respect work that's been done over the years. It's not because I don't respect standing in the community. It's because I believe that this commission, this task force, has to be comprised of people, as I said a couple of weeks ago, who respect the humanity of the other and the officer. It needs to be a place where people, populated by people who are able to be constructive and to respect the humanity of the other and the officer. At the council table on November 5, 2015, we were here and we listened to Ms. Buckley make the following statement in the course of her public comment. She expressed her upset and concern about the death of Ara Rosser. She expressed her admiration for her. She expressed her regret that she died, and she expressed her view. She demanded that she be heard, that there were alternatives. These are the things that, these were her position. And she was angry, and I have no problem with anger. This is a subject that injustices that we've experienced in our country, in our community. Anger is perfectly appropriate. I have myself asked people who have been, and I should say, and critique of the Ann Arbor Police is entirely appropriate and not at all a bar to participation in this process. I myself have asked people who have to participate ultimately in the commission, who have stood up here at this podium and said some very strong and negative things about how Ann Arbor Police do their job. That's a view in the community. It's a view in the community that needs to be engaged, and I believe that the Ann Arbor Police Department are ready to engage it. As I indicated, it's a forum along the way. I sit in the room with the white guys who talk about the policing commission, and the police, I believe, are looking forward to this conversation. They look forward to explaining to people about their work that they do. They look forward to listening to how they can do better. Ms. Buckley, however, went on to say that if you won't at least fire Officer Reed, then let's string him up. If you won't at least fire Officer Reed, then let's string him up. This drew applause from the audience. It was, and I mean, that's a call for violence against an officer, a call for violence against city staff is, in my view, unacceptable. In my view, it's disqualifying for participation in this process. I have no problem with anger. As I've indicated, the call for violence against an officer, call for violence against any city staff is unacceptable in my view, and a disqualification for participation. Further discussion? Roll call vote. Councilmember Bannister.
Yeah, I respectfully want to say that I do feel strongly that looking at the comparison between that Shirley Beckley do be on the commission, when we look at what the Human Rights Commission originally proposed and then what the counter resolution is, I think that Shirley Beckley needs to be on there. She's known in the community as a champion for these issues, and that I think, as one of the public comment people said, it does undermine the credibility and of the ultimate work of the commission. So I feel that that her presence strengthens the commission and And for all the reasons, her flexibility, her group facilitation, her team playing, her devotion to this issue, all of her wisdom as a senior member of our community. So I would rather see Shirley Beckley on here than a couple others that we had. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Lum.
Mr. Mayor, this is awkward. Ms. Beckley, you know, and sitting before us, Mr. Gallimore and others who are qualified, and I've known both for many years, especially Mr. Gallimore, and I appreciate the interest expressed by these folks to serve on this task force. Obviously, it represents a significant time commitment, shows that all these folks care about our city. I will say, I do believe that the mayor has taken the time to carefully consider all the appointments. I'd like to also thank the Human Rights Commission for the time they've spent. But because the process that was outlined for creating the task force and appointing the members was established by council at our February 5th meeting, we're following that process, and these appointments, with having the appointments made by the mayor, we're following that process, and I am going to, I'll support that. And as noted by the mayor in his thoughtful comments, explaining and walking us all through what he considered when considering all the applicants. His recommendations do, for the most part, follow those of the Human Rights Commission. That's appropriate. There are a couple of differences, but that is the mayor's prerogative. And I am confident that he's thoroughly thought this through. So with my sincere apologies to those who've applied and are not on this list, I will be supporting the appointments that the mayor has put forth.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to add to that. Councilmember Lum and I don't always agree on things, but we do this evening in this case. And I have sincere appreciation for everyone whose activism has pushed this forward. I do have concerns about this idea that when we have a number of individuals who have also put themselves out there, who do meet a lot of the criteria that the Human Rights Commission asked us to, and then we put forward in creating this task force, that somehow if all of these caring individuals work really hard and make recommendations with a co-chair who not only happens to be a resident of my ward, but is a respected member of the community, and it just seems that we're not giving these other residents a chance to come forward and actually create something. To say that it undermines their credibility, I think, is not fair to the people that have put that have put themselves forward and that intend to work hard. I think the mayor said we have other opportunities to participate. It is my full expectation that this task force will get a great deal of input from the community. So for those who did put their names forward and weren't selected, it is certainly my expectation that that they will have an opportunity to participate in this process. Also, I just wanted to add that we are putting off the search for our police chief because we take this process so seriously and have so much respect for this process, that we would not have a chief of police come into the city of Ann Arbor without understanding that this is one of their primary goals, coming in to improve relations with the community according to the goals put out by this task force and the eventual commission, that working with this commission is going to be an important part of their role, and such a key part of their role that we will not even post the position until we understand what this commission is going to look like. So while I will not be supporting Mr. Eaton's amendment, I do have so much respect for everyone who put their names forward, and look forward to the results in September.
Further discussion? Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. With the council's indulgence, if I may, before speaking to the amendment itself, I spent a good chunk of the weekend reaching out to the 4 members from the Human Rights Commission list that aren't on the original resolution before us. And one of the things that Ms. Beckley said to me as we spoke today was that frustration that she has never heard any apology from the city for the death of Aura Rosser. So, her comment, so I want to say that for my part, I'm deeply sorry. I deeply mourn the death of Aura Rosser. I think that her death was a tragedy. I mourn it. I'm sorry that it happened. And I hope that the processes that this commission will set in place will help us go through a process of reviewing our training, reviewing our use of force policies and procedures, setting in the things that will so that that kind of thing never takes place again. The questions as to whether or not I've said at a previous meeting, these questions of what is misconduct, what is illegal, are a narrower set of questions than the question of what causes harm. The county prosecutor made the determination that there was not a legal violation in the death, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't pain caused by that process. For the pain, for the death, for the suffering of those in the community who loved her and those who were affected by her death, I am sorry. I am sorry. On the composition of the committee, the City Council empowered the Human Rights Commission to to make recommendations for an 11-person commission. From the Human Rights Commission, we received a list of 13 recommendations and 2 alternates. The mayor's recommendations take 9 of those 13, one of those alternates, and replaces one of and also adds an additional person, Mr. Sobel. I believe, and as I've indicated, I've spent the weekend listening to people, especially the people on those 4 people who were on the HRC list but didn't make the cut. I mean, just to be fair, just straight up math, to get to the 11 people that were named in the council resolution, to get from there to from the 13 people that came as primary recommendations from the HRC to the 11 people we're discussing tonight was going to require some cuts. All of the 4 people on that list have long tenures of hard work and service on this issue, as well as the people that are on the mayor's appointment list. Mr. Gallimore, as Councilmember Lum has indicated, has a long history of service, extensive work on issues of youth empowerment, prison reform, the Stand Your Ground law. He's been a community leader in a lot of ways. Ms. Stambaugh, as the chair of the Human Rights Commission, has put in hours and hours and hours on this issue. Reverend Jeff Harold, also at the University of Michigan faculty, has done, on the academic advising, has put in tremendous hours working in prison ministry and also working on police reform issues countywide. And of course, we've heard a little bit about Ms. Beckley's long commitment. I've seen her be fiery and impassioned. I've also seen her work hard to be a real bridge builder. Shortly after our current police chief, Chief Baird, was brought on as our police chief, I worked to get Ms. Beckley, some other community leaders, and the chief in a dialogue. And I think that, the chief was, he's leaving now, so I can say this, but he was nervous walking in. I don't think he'd be having seen the fiery side of Ms. Beckley. I think he was worried about what he was going to step into, and what he found was somebody who really worked hard to build a positive relationship. As I've spent this weekend trying to decide, would I support the slate that was on the agenda, or would I seek an amendment to change it, I've really been wrestling with these 4 names. And I've decided to support the names that were initially put forward by the mayor, partly because there's 11 spots and more great people than 11 applying. I think the overall body has a high level of diversity. It's majority people of color. It's 18% African-American males. And for me, as I thought in particular about Ms. Beckley's leadership, while I've seen her be a peacemaker, for my part, the string 'em up comment was a disqualification. I'm sure that she will continue to agitate. I'm sure that she will continue to organize. I'm sure she will continue to have influence on this policy. But I'm afraid I will not be supporting Mr. Eaton's amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, on the amendment, starting with Councilmember Lum on the amendment.
Councilmember Lum?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crable?
No.
Councilmember Wojciechowski?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Cosapathy?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westphal?
No.
Motion fails.
Further discussion of the main motion? Councilmember Lum?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. On this, I would also just note, and thank you again, I know you've thought this through carefully, and do appreciate all the work that the Human Rights Commission and you and the administrator, everyone has spent on this. Folks who've had meetings, conversations with folks who've been interested and applied. Appreciate my colleagues' attention to all of this. I would just note that in response to a question I asked this morning to clarify the AAPD's involvement with the task force, it was indicated the AAPD would, quote, provide technical expertise, facilitate training, and fulfill a liaison function with the task force, end quote. I will just note that I find that encouraging, and I'm hopeful that the Ann Arbor Police Department will be fully engaged. I believe that if the task force and the Ann Arbor Police Department work together in defining roles and responsibilities of the new commission, there's a higher probability the commission will be successful and effective in the long term. The primary underlying purpose of the commission is to improve the relationship between the Ann Arbor Police Department and our residents, and I just think that the best path forward to achieve that starts with a collaborative effort in defining the commission's roles and responsibilities. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for working so hard on this over the last month or so, and I look forward to seeing the task force recommendations in the fall. Thank you.
Further discussion? Sorry, Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all of those who have shown up tonight and have showed up for the past months and years, and will hopefully continue to show up. Your activism is exactly what we want and what we need. It is impassioned, it's bold. It's kept us focused and on a very tight timeline. This is government being responsive compared to the pace at which a lot of things move. And you all deserve a lot of credit for that. As we move forward, I'm glad to see this task force being assembled in the manner that it is. When we first voted on this resolution, I very plainly stated I don't believe that this is work for me. I'm a white male. I've only had positive interactions with the police. And even my negative interactions have been far more positive than many. We need to look outside of ourselves for the best recommendations of how to move forward. And as we do, there remain 3 areas that I need more information and feedback around. The first is, what should the policing commission's leverage be? How do we ensure that this citizen body has the power it needs to push the police force in a positive direction? How do we create meaningful reform? The second is, what resources will you need to do your work? What do you need from the city staff, from City Hall, from independent consultants to make sure that you have the answers and the data you need to make the most effective decisions about policing strategy and staffing? And the third is, how do we respect the privacy and maintain the trust amongst victims, amongst the police officers themselves? These are going to be incredibly sensitive issues with very delicate solutions, and I need your advice on all three of those matters. So I look forward to the work at hand. I look forward to those who have been involved to continue to be involved, to push the task force, to engage them, to get them to the point that they need to be. And then as the commission is formed, do the same. This work is going to be ongoing. It can never end because this is a living city hall. It's a living police department. And we all need to be vigilant as these reforms are unrolled in the processes and the systems to get us there manifest. So this is a critical step, but it is simply a first step. And I look forward to the hard work to come.
Councilor McCollum-Sapathy.
Thank you. I think we have come to this stage in the last 2.5 years primarily or almost solely because the community has pushed us to this point. Your oversight, your input, your comments, your constant prodding and nudging is why we are here at this point in time. So I think it's really important to setting up the task force is just the beginning. The task force meetings are going to be governed by Open Meetings Act. So all of you who turn up for our Human Rights Commission meetings and public hearings we have had through the Human Rights Commission meeting, please do come, because the charter is going to be written by this task force, and it is really important for you to be there. I'm one of those people who is less inclined towards consultants and outside people coming, because I feel knowledge is always local, knowledge is always embedded, knowledge is very specific. So it's really important that instead of relying on a consultant who comes in for 3 days and writes up a generic proposal, that you speak from your experiences of Ann Arbor. So that's one issue. And because part of, not to keep hopping back, but part of the problem with Hillard Science was it was a group, few people who came from Chicago. I mean, they would come here for 2-3 days and try to interview a few people, and they were in Chicago writing up their reports. And it would have been great if we had had a group here doing the work, because they would have reached out to, and I have complained several times about the demographic groups that they failed to interview, despite my prodding to go to the Ward 1 and talk to people who needed to be spoken to. So I think that's another really important point that we really need to keep in mind, to make sure people who are affected by policing, whether it's Black youth or other demographic groups who are affected, they have the safe space to come and speak. And again, I have said neither white liberalism or white liberals is a substitute for actual lived experiences of minorities in this country. Okay? So please be vigilant. Please be there, because we want to get this right, and we can get it right only when it comes from us, right? Thank you.
Councilmember Crapo.
Thank you, everyone who's here tonight. We always appreciate the public coming and sharing their views. I'd like to thank the members of the HRC who have been instrumental in moving this forward. I've had the pleasure to be one of the council liaison there for the last couple of years, and sit and listen to the discussion, not always, sometimes heated amongst people about where we need to go and what needs to go on. But I appreciate their work in helping to get us to this point. And I think as other council members have said, you know, the formation of the task force is really, I think, is our first step, is in trying to set up what the boundaries, the rules, how we're going to run this commission, at least to get it up and going to start. I think it's an aggressive timeline to have everything by September, but I think it's doable, and I think with the people who I see on the, who are going to be on the task force, I think it's possible. And I think, you know, once we get the commission going, I think it's going to be an evolving group. I think it's going to be one probably of the most challenging and dynamic commissions we have because of the way the world is, the way the police is going, and all those things that it'll never, I think, to be a member of it, I think it's going to be a constant learning experience for everyone. I think there's going to be opportunities for both on the city side and the community side to continuously learn and grow and develop. What I really hope comes out of this is a place or is an organization of active engagement back and forth between the police, between the communities, all aspects, all parts of our community there, that eventually will lead to greater trust and greater engagement overall. That won't be easy or short-term coming. It's going to take time. Police officers I have spoken to, I think are looking forward to it in terms of how it's going to become a place to learn how they can get better, how they can better serve the community, what types of training, what training are we missing that we need to start taking, that we need to have for our officers, and we need to pay for. I think, and I've said in the past, you know, I think even the mix of what our police department needs to look like, and I've said before, maybe we need social workers that can be there, that can help be on the first line of engagement when an officer encounters one of our residents who's having problems and maybe would slip through the system otherwise. I think it's, the commission represents hope because I think we can develop a commission that can set the standard for other communities to follow. There's been a number of attempts in a number of different communities to do things, and I think we can put our mark on what this is for our community, and we can set a standard for others to follow, and hopefully others even within our county and then within Southeast Michigan and you know, our own neighborhood here first. So I am looking forward to it. I think the task force has an important role, and I think we've got qualified people. I think we've got a good diversity of folks on it that can bring different opinions and ideas. I don't think it'll always be quiet. I'm hoping there's active engagement within the task force itself, so we get not to a solution, but to the best solution we can have for our community, for setting up the policing commission moving forward. Thank you.
Further discussion of the main motion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Lum.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapo?
Yes.
Councilmember Wojciechowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Kawasapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Motion carries.
DC2, resolution supporting Energy Commission's resolution concerning DTE's Propos 1100 megawatt natural gas power plan. Moved by Councilmember Eaton, seconded by Councilmember Crapo. Discussion, please, of DC2. Councilmember Eaton.
So following up on the confidential advice we got from city attorney, I'm going to move to table this at this time.
Seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Your discussion and tabling? I forget. Motion to table is not subject to debate. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Lum.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapo?
Yes.
Councilmember Wojciechowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Kawasapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Motion carries.
DC 3, resolution opposing the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017 and the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017, moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Warpachowski. Discussion, please, of DC 3. Councilmember Smith.
So I believe all of us got the email with a lot of the research that was put forward and is contained in this resolution late Thursday night. Generally, we don't have much ability to influence legislative decisions in Washington, D.C. But what compelled me to pull this language together and to move forward with this is the growing body of communities that have come out in opposition to the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017. I believe it's our responsibility to speak very loudly that particularly on matters that impact our potential public safety as well as limit our ability to make local decisions that keep our residents safe. And I bring this forward based on the fact that we as a council have been fairly vocal in voicing our support for the Ann Arbor Public Schools position opposing firearms on school property. We have been very adamant in our support that firearms really don't have a place in civil society. They are instruments of, they are quite frankly instruments of death, and that's what they're intended to be. And it has been this body's position that that the greater regulation of these tools is in the public's best interest. So I bring this forward without pride of authorship, but merely reflecting a broader community sentiment here in Ann Arbor. And I thank all of my colleagues who have stepped forward to co-sponsor this, and I would like to thank the Washtenaw County chapter of Moms Demand Action, and I would like to thank the gentleman whose name escapes me that shared this research with us. But we will be the 29th community to join this list of cities that are opposed to the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you. I've always considered myself a mama's boy, so when moms demand action, I usually like to do so. For those who are here in the audience and listening at home, Michigan sends 9 Republicans to D.C. every 2 years. And hopefully that'll change after November, but until then, you have an opportunity to contact Congress members Bergman, Hunsinga, Amash, Molinar, Upton, Wahlberg, Bishop, Mitchell, and Trott, and remind them that the Republican Party is the party of states' rights. It's the party of local control, and if they want to live their values, Tea Party or traditional conservative, they have to ensure that states have the ability to regulate the use of firearms to the degree they believe keeps their citizens safe. Now, if the federal government wants to decide to keep people even safer through common sense legislation, I may change my tune. But until that day, please remind these 9 public servants that they have an obligation to both keep their residents safe, young and old, but also they have an obligation to their values to ensure that states have the ability to keep their people safe to the degree that they believe they should.
Further discussion? Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor if there's still room. I would like to echo the sentiments of Councilmember Ackerman. I think the county chapter of Moms Demand Action is doing a great job bringing visibility to this and many other issues. Local control when it suits them is precisely the point here, and unfortunately this is just the latest bad idea from the party of more guns in more places, and this is going in exactly the opposite direction that this country needs to go in this state. What's being proposed is basically a race to the bottom or lowest common denominator policy for gun control. And again, it's going in the opposite direction it needs to, and it flies in the face of reason and any sensible firearm regulation. So I'm happy to support this.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I appreciate the work that Councilmember Smith did in bringing this together and support from the community. I would be remiss, although not completely related, if I didn't take this opportunity to thank all of the young people in our community who came out and showed leadership, showed us what our values really should look like, and you know, it's a wonderful and terrible thing at the same time when we're asking our middle schoolers and high schoolers to tell adults how they should be behaving and what common sense regulation should look like and why they're responsible for keeping them safe when they can't vote themselves yet. And I hope that many of you will join me and others on March 24th to march at Pioneer High School.
Further discussion, Councilmember Crapo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start, I think, all I'd like to say is how unfortunate that we actually have to be here today and we actually have to be discussing this, that we've gotten to this point in our society where we're here after another school shooting, trying with folks in our community, trying to make a difference, our young people having to walk out and hold rallies instead of having supposedly the adults, or at least our elected leaders in Washington, doing the right thing, instead of taking sides, doing what's right, doing what's best for all of us, and not just what's best for certain groups or certain interest groups overall. And it's unfortunate how far we've strayed from some of our values overall. In terms of keeping all our residents and keeping everyone safe. So I'm happy to support this because I think, again, anything that moves towards more common sense in firearms, I'm not sure how far things will ever go, but if we can push and get some of these more ridiculous or laws that protect some parts of our country or some parts of the legislation around firearms taken off the books, I think the better we are. Thank you.
Further discussion? For my part, I just want to thank Councilmember Smith and the unnamed gentleman for bringing this to our attention. Of course, the great work that the county's Moms Demand Action does in this issue. And just wanted to tack to a little bit on what Councilmember Grant said. I had the pleasure of being at Tappan High School on walkout day, and did I say Tappan High School? They're not quite high school students, really.
They were just behaving like at that time.
Well, that's right. They were aspiring to take the lead that their high school brethren and sister had provided. It was a great day, and it was great seeing Ann Arbor students taking action. And, this is, I think, the least we can do in this regard. Councilmember Smith.
In the spirit of giving credit where credit is due, the gentleman who shared this research with us is Matthew Cornelong.
Mr. Cornelong, thank you. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DB1, resolution to approve 1505 White Street site plan, moved by Councilmember Crapo, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion, please, of DB1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. Do we have any communications today from our city attorney? No, Mayor. We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grant. Discussion of the clerk's report.
Just quickly, Councilmember Bannister, and I don't think...
Please,
Thank you.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to draw people's eyes to F6. This is something that Mr. Pratt spoke to at the beginning of the meeting and something Councilmember Bannister and I spoke to at our previous meeting. This falls in line with recommendations from the Housing Commission with respect to how we spend allocations of the mental health rebate on our affordable housing, with cuts to the Section 8 programs coming out of Washington, D.C. our Housing Commission's ability to pay for supportive services associated with the healthy and stable running of our affordable housing system are in jeopardy. The Housing Commission will have to divert funds from these critical supportive services to maintaining operations at levels that will keep our thousands of residents in our system safely housed. As a result, the Housing Commission is looking to the city to step in and pay for these very critical services that go to keeping families in their homes, keeping families fed, keeping kids educated. So I'll be working with Councilmember Bannister likely to draft a very similar resolution for your consideration in the coming meetings.
Further discussion on the clerk's report? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? It is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
My name is Edward Vilmetti. I'll keep my comments brief and try not to get quoted in the newspaper about them, lest it come back to haunt me 2 years later. I am concerned about the topic of water rates. I spoke about this in front of a very small dedicated group last week, but I'll bring it up again at council, the full council meeting. The proposal that was presented at the working session would raise water rates for single-family residences and would overall lower water rates for multifamily dwellings, even for the consumption of the same gallon of water. The proposed rates would tier more extremely the rates for single-family residences so that if your toilet was left running, as it was at my house a couple years ago, or if you left your hose running too long, or if you grew tomatoes or did anything else that was a high use of water, you might get an unexpectedly high water bill. And by unexpectedly high, I mean that the gallon of water that would cost you $1 and change for the first gallon would cost you more than 8 times that for the marginal gallon at the highest unit of use. Even if you consume that gallon during the month of February, where the use of water is traditionally the lowest. The city staff that presented this seemed to think that this was all quite fair and equitable based on 100 million data points that they had collected of city water use over the course of a couple of years. I am worried that some of our residents who don't read the newspaper anymore and who grow tomatoes on their property and have a fixed income, just to pick the worst case, are going to find a water bill surprise. And if they don't get that addressed, they're not going to be happy. I'm probably not affected too much personally. We're thinking about getting a low-flow toilet. That might help for a year. I'm also worried that the change in rates will only be the first increase in rates, because if people do conserve in the face of extreme high rates, the proposed revenue from those extreme high rates might not materialize, and it might be a multi-year ratchet. So I'm worried about the water bills, but I'll be calm in saying so. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Is it in regard to any issue?
Any issue whatsoever, just come on up.
Hi, my name is Karen Costomo, and I'm from Ward 3, Precinct 8. See, 3 of us here. I started getting more involved again with the Ann Arbor City Council meeting because I was very concerned previously when one of our citizens, longtime citizen, and I've been a citizen myself since 1976 here in Ann Arbor, a resident, very concerned when there was expressing concerns about lack of trust with the mayoral office, the police department, and I was wondering if we could maybe ameliorate that more. The task force is a really good start for the police department, but what the NAACP, one of the members there, mentioned that why don't we have meetings with the mayoral office? So like having meetings with the city, that might be an opportunity to establish trust, because they said the real issue between a lot of the community and the city is a lack of trust with the process, because we're not listening to the citizens completely. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, thank you for your transparency tonight. I don't think that that was easy at all. So I want to acknowledge the difficulty emotionally, psychologically, and intellectually to deal with the issues of race for all of us in this room who heard you speak about the words of Shirley Beckley. I know that Officer Reed is not and will never be in danger of being lynched by Shirley Beckley. I think we all know that. But I also know how deeply shocking the image of stringing someone up, a human being, is. And what I also want to share is how difficult it is to handle that notion if no one in our group, no one in our family, no one in our ancestry has ever experienced that. And if that's not our experience, then it's very difficult to grasp the enormity of what that means. And what I see it as meaning is the most quintessential feeling of powerlessness and annihilation. So that's my sense of where Shirley was at the time that she spoke those words. My heart is really pounding because this is deep water, and this is where the task force is going to go. And it's going to address things that are uncomfortable, that are painful, and that have to be talked about by all of us. So I couldn't leave tonight without speaking to what we all shared and how hard it was to hear and how much importance there is in those words. Whoa.
Thank you.
I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm going to be a lot less polite than Ms. Saginaw. So I'm here again to address some racist remarks made by the council and the mayor tonight. I want to say that I'm very disappointed in the mayor and the other council members for his expectations that participants in the police oversight task force be willing to engage with police who do not see the humanity in them. For his inability to look at Shirley as anything but an angry black woman, apparently. White supremacy is seeing anger and expressions of anger, of outrage by black residents, and seeing that as a lapse in judgment. As if their rage isn't a sign that you need to do better. As if their lack of consideration for your feelings isn't directly caused by your lack of consideration for their lives. As if a healthy, grieving person should feel anything but anger when a close community member gets murdered by a cop who gets to keep his badge. Councilmember Warpahowski, Councilmember Grand, Councilmember Lum, you said that if those impacted by police brutality don't care about your feelings, you won't care about their survival. That's what I extrapolated from your words, and that's what I heard you all say. Mayor Taylor referenced a comment that Ms. Beckley made a while ago about stringing up Officer Reed and saw that as grounds for barring her from lending her extensive expertise and understanding her commitment to fairness and transparency to the task force. My grievances and disappointment to your inability to understand power, to understand justice, and to understand how to work with people. Finally, I'd like to thank Councilmember Jack Eaton as a proud Ward 3 resident, Councilmember Bannister and Councilmember Kalasapathy for their humane handling of the situation, for honoring the HRC's judgment and advocacy for the city's ultimate best interests. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I was thinking about whether I actually wanted to start off with this first paragraph, because I know sometimes that if people consistently, like, you know, I'm just not even gonna start with that sentence. I just wanted to reiterate Anne-Marie Zhao's point that I'm pretty disappointed with some of the things that Mayor Taylor said and that some of the other council members said. It's gonna be really hard to follow him up, so sorry. Firstly, Mayor Taylor's statement that you do not wanna have public conversations. You're a mayor, this is your job, and I know that public hearings are not fun. Like, I'm hearing that you would probably rather have these conversations without several dozen people in the room, and maybe off camera as well. And like, frankly, I'd rather not be standing up here right now because I shake like a leaf when I get up in front of crowds. Like, my heart is racing right now. But I'm not a mayor, I'm not a public servant. So public conversations really come with the territory, especially for something that's as emotionally laden, as Lori pointed out, as police oversight. And secondly, I would like to reiterate what I said at the Human Rights Commission's meeting, where the word collaboration was thrown around quite a bit. I said that you can't have collaboration and you can't really have trust, which is a word that's getting thrown around a lot today, without an equal balance of power at the table. And again, I'm not an expert on collaboration, but I did write my master's thesis on collaboration, and if you doubt that, you can find it on UofM's Deep Blue archive. It just got published. Without Shirley Beckley, the balance of power at the table will still be skewed against members of the community that are most impacted by policing. In fact, I would argue that if only half of the task force is white, that's still going to have an imbalance of power, because that is literally how deep the roots of white supremacy run. And I have issues with the Supreme Court, but I will quote Ruth Bader Ginsburg here when she was asked when will enough women have served at the Supreme Court? When there are 9, is what she answered. And I think you can apply that same attitude towards other demographic aspects and other identities at a negotiating table. And again, finally, I wonder if the council members would have had this long discussion about the string 'em up comment if Ms. Beckley was a man, especially a white man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hard to follow that. I'm Leslie Stanbaugh. I'm chair of the Human Rights Commission, and I thank you all. This has been, we did the first cut, as you all acknowledged, and I know how very, very difficult it is. We've got an awful lot of strong skills, strong experience, people who are very passionate and want to help. I think it's nice that we're all wanting to help. And I think it's sad that we're not listening to one another as much as we should and with the respect that we need to do. But this is the beginning of the dialogue, and the dialogue does not feel comfortable. It hasn't felt comfortable for the Human Rights Commission for a long time, and we have listened and listened and listened, and I think it's been helpful. I hope it's been helpful. It's gotten us to this point. We are progressing, and I think that this is what progress looks like, but it doesn't feel good. And I just give you all a lot of credit for doing what I think you did in a very sensible way, not a perfect way. There was no perfect way. One of the things that we noticed in the Human Rights Commission when we were coming up with the 15 people was how difficult it was. We made it more difficult for you because we picked off the top 15. But any one of them, any one of the 26 people who were on our ultimate list could have contributed a great deal. We've got to start somewhere. This is a good place to start. And thank you for the work you've all done.
Thank you.
Hello. I think I ought to stand. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I think I better say something. I'm not going to apologize for my statement back then. It was very hurtful to see a black woman killed and not helped, especially since she was a mental health patient, and you all knew that. I'm not going to apologize for my ancestors who have been strung up, lynched, run over, babies cut out of their bellies, families separated. We're still looking for families in my family and several other families. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for my anger. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I've been here 75 years. No, I haven't seen you make much progress. You have made progress to have a task force, and I'm happy about that. It doesn't really matter if I'm on there or not. The fact that you did it is a plus, and I'm very happy about that. But Mayor Taylor, you are not anybody that walks in my shoes. You're a white man. I'm a black woman. You have no black anything. I don't know, you might, but from what I'm seeing. And for you to sit there and take a statement that you have no idea of where it came from, and you have never talked to me personally about the statement or my feelings, I think is a travesty. And I don't appreciate that you take it, and you seem to have taken it personally. The main thing is, Aura is dead and Officer Reed killed her. I talked about stringing him, he's still living and making a paycheck. Now, how you take that and put it in some kind of context to eliminate me, I'm not quite understanding, other than it shows your white privilege and your white supremacy. And I will, as long as I can live, be in this city, come to this meeting, and still oppose you and anybody else that carries those feelings. That's all I have to say to you tonight.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? I'm afraid you're not, ma'am. One per customer. Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Do we have a closed session today?
Mayor, we do have a closed session under the Open Meetings Act. It's on pending litigation and attorney-client privileged communication. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped communications from council. Are there communications from council prior to the call for a closed session? Councilmember Warpahowski, Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. 2 points. First of all, in response to the public commentary at the end of the meeting, I heard your comment about how nominations are discussed differently, and I'm wondering perhaps you could comment. What I heard from you was a desire not to speak on why people were not chosen, not to get into the to speak to the merits of the people who were chosen rather than to get into why not this person, rather than the avoidance of having discussion of the issues, so I heard it differently. The other thing, that I just wanted to make a comment of, entirely minor in comparison, is I think the technical challenges we saw this evening I would like to encourage the Council Rules Committee to reconsider our ban on email communications to each other and the public. The inability to get a simple ordinance, resolution amendment to council. I think we unduly complicate the process by requiring people to send everything to the clerk, and then the clerk sends it out to council. I would ask the Council Rules Committee to explore allowing council members to send amendments to the body as a whole, so long as they CC the clerk and so long as the communication is to the body as a whole. I also think that we've heard from other people that say we can't follow along with these amendments, so as long as as long as the communications are CC'd to the body as a whole and to the clerk, I think that we should also allow them to be CC'd to members of the public, so, and to the news media, so that what we're discussing is something that the broader community can follow along with. And as long as I'm on this little soapbox, as I've read through the list of council emails and redactions, I've noticed that sometimes people who have had the misfortune of emailing council during our meetings have had information disclosed and posted on the web that they probably never anticipated would be made public. People's personal emails, people's personal addresses, discussions of the health situations that their families are going through, and they say, sorry, it took me a while to get back to you. I am not convinced that publicizing this kind of information on the website, just because somebody has the bad luck of emailing us during a council meeting, serves the public well. And I would ask the Council Rules Committee to reevaluate the rule that we are going to publicize emails from the public to council members that happen to land in our inboxes during council meeting. Thank you.
Councilmember Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Warpahosky covered most of what I was going to say. It's just a clarification about the comment about transparency of appointments. As with this task force, as with the majority of boards and committee appointments, the procedure is that they're nominated by the mayor and confirmed by council. If people would like to talk about that process, I think that's fine. I've been happy with it, and I've never witnessed any hint of an OMA violation in this regard, because the recommendation is typically brought by the mayor. So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you for all your work on the appointments.
Councilmember Lum.
Just a quick follow-on to that. I agree. I think it's a good process. The mayor makes appointments, and I've lived through this process with mayors of different parties at the helm, and it's always been viewed as appropriate. I mean, you are the greater amongst us, there's no question about it. I've always viewed the mayor's position in that respect, and so this was a good process, and I think that's proper protocol. So, and I know you put a lot of thought into this. Just to follow on to comment by Councilmember Warpahosky, I too feel when I see private emails, sent to us, constituent requests sort of thing, that comes to us maybe during a council meeting, got a couple tonight. But I think those are only, and I could very well be wrong, I never respond to them during the council meeting, because I realize that if I respond to them, then that will appear on the record. If I don't react, don't respond, it won't be on the public record, so their email won't be out there for all the world to see. And so I never do that stuff during a meeting, so I think that that's a good thing, I think, for all of us, and that's a way to keep those emails between, that constituent and the person that they're contacting, because I don't think their intent is to have the general public, see those kinds of concerns. So I am a little concerned about, opening that door, and I've made the mistake. I mean, if I've had an amendment, I've sent it to all of you. Not appreciating that there's a rule that we're supposed to send it to the clerk, and then she sends it on, and I think the clerk turns them around pretty fast, and that could be a slippery slope that, we could start communicating. I'm not suggesting by any means that that's what Councilmember Warpahosky is recommending, but it's a good safeguard. So anyway, just my 2 cents on those couple of things. Thank you.
Further communication? Councilmember Kalasapathy.
Yeah, following on with Councilmember Warpahosky and Councilmember Lum. I mean, it's going to be, if we email to constituents during council time, then staff are going to be, let's say I sit here, and I don't do that, but I'm just saying hypothetically, I sit here and there are
28 emails that I haven't looked at during the day and I'm typing away, then it's the staff's, the onus is on the staff to be going through all these emails. Is this political? Is this something about policy? Is this about her kids? So I'm not sure I'm very comfortable that this kind of a value judgment is being made on, and I just think it's easier that we don't email during council time so that we don't get into this tug of war of, no, that wasn't really policy, I was just commenting or something like that. So I would rather, I hear you, but I think it's just, we should just keep it clean. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Further communication from council? I'd just like to follow up briefly after Council Member Warpahowski's prompt. Yes, that is correct. Obviously, public discussion is central to basically everything that we do here. What I believe to be regrettable is the public evaluation of people who sign up to be volunteers to boards and commissions. It is a vulnerable thing, and I think that public critique from a council member or a mayor merely because you've signed up in an effort and volunteered to sit on a board and commission is regrettable. Further discussion? I believe we have the closed session called for by by Councilmember Postma. Good Lord.
You want me to repeat it again?
Why don't you?
Under the Open Meetings Act for pending litigation and written attorney-client privileged communication.
Discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with sorry, motion to go to closed session. Thank you. Moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, second by Councilmember Crapel. Discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Lum.
Councilmember Lum?
Aye, yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor? Yes. Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Crapel? Yes. Councilmember Warpahowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Affirmative.
Councilmember Kalasapati?
Yes?
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion, please, to go back into open session? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are back in open session. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion? All in favor? All opposed? We are adjourned.